Hey there, welcome back to Undercover Mysteries. Today, we're taking you into the heart of two terrifying cave stories, where escape was never an option. Both adventurers became trapped in the depths of the earth, fighting to get out, but never seeing the light again. But stick around for the second story. It's not just the ending that's tragic, it's what happened in the moments before that still baffles everyone. Ready to dive deep into the unknown? Let's get started. This final adventure began on a brisk Saturday morning with Donald and his boys, Christopher and Roger, filled with anticipation. The Crooked Swamp cave system had always intrigued Donald, with its complex network of passages and chambers, each one offering a new challenge. Donald and his two boys were leading a scout group. The group members were excited too, though some were visibly nervous about the day ahead. However, Donald was not experiencing his first trip. He had always enjoyed leading the scout into many different mysterious caves. Besides Donald, another scoutmaster joined the trip. The group of 12 boys was a mix of eager and nervous scouts, each ready to face the claustrophobic conditions of the cave. As they gathered at the cave entrance, Donald and Jim laid down the ground rules once more. Safety was paramount. The boys were to stay close, always keep their buddy in sight, and only explore the areas the scoutmasters had cleared. The entrance to Crooked Swamp Cave was almost hidden. A small opening, just 16 inches high, 28 inches wide. It was a test of courage for the scouts, many of whom had never faced such tight spaces before. As they squeezed through the entrance, initial anxiety turned into excitement and anticipation. Inside, they found themselves in a relatively spacious room, about 300 square feet with ceilings between 8 and 11 feet high. Donald and Jim positioned themselves at opposite ends of the room, keeping a watchful eye on the boys as they explored the larger paths branching out from the main chamber. The main chamber pointed to different smaller tunnels, but both the scout leaders were unsure of the path to take, as any one of them could lead into a dead end. However, the boys were much smaller than the two men. Therefore, Donald was convinced that boys will easily make it through the tiniest of the paths. But stupid of his act, he didn't think it for himself. Donald eagerly decided to explore a smaller tunnel that branched off from the main room. Donald, standing at 511 and weighing 160 pounds, was familiar with tight squeezes in caves. His familiarity with caving gave him confidence as he slid into the 18 by 20 inches passage. The mud made the going slippery, but he managed to make steady progress. His sons kept close, ready to relay information back to the group. But as he maneuvered through a tight turn, Donald suddenly felt the ground give way beneath him. He slid into a narrow crevice, unable to stop his descent. Though the fall was only a few feet, Donald found himself wedged in a keyhole-shaped tunnel that narrowed to just 5 inches at the bottom. His arms were pinned at his sides, and every attempt to move only wedged him further into the crevice. He called out to his sons, instructing them to stop and stay calm. He tried to push himself out of the tunnel, but it was no use. Donald remained stuck. Donald asked Christopher to help him get out of the tunnel. He tried to grab the shoes of his father surrounded by mud, but due to confined space, he was left with no choice but to go and get some help. Christopher and Roger, realizing the severity of the situation, retreated to fetch Jim. Jim squeezed into the narrow passage and found Donald's legs protruding from the tight turn. The 30-degree angle made it nearly impossible to pull him out. Each tug only seemed to tighten the cave's grip. Rocks that had loosened during Donald's slide now blocked any backward movement. Hours passed with Donald still trapped. Jim and the boys couldn't free him, so they called for help. A specialized cave rescue team arrived, facing the daunting task of navigating the 18-inch wide tunnel. They quickly got to work, trying to rig up ropes to pull Donald out of the tight passage. However, despite the combined strength of several people, their efforts only wedged him further under the ledge and rock that trapped him. The rescuers couldn't reach the rock blocking the path, and Donald's hands were pinned by his body in the narrow fissure he had slid into. Realizing that pulling him free wasn't an option, they brought in chisels and small jackhammers to break apart the larger pieces of rock. This painstaking work in the cramped space yielded little progress, but they persisted, hoping to eventually free him. Rescuers managed to keep Donald as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. They used heat lamps and warm water bottles on his exposed legs. But the cold cave air and constant contact with the rock were relentless. The temperature inside the cave was a mere 57 degrees, and hypothermia was a real threat. Cavers, with extensive knowledge of the system, knew of another cave that connected to the tunnel near where Donald was trapped. They entered this cave from the opposite side and explored until they found a passage leading directly to the tiny tunnel. However, only the smallest cavers could navigate this narrow passage. Two sisters, Lynn and Nancy Taylor, were perfect for the task. Nancy at 52,105 pounds and Lynn at 5 pounds 86 pence had the advantage of their petite size. Lynn, using her tiny frame, managed to wiggle through the extremely narrow passages in the second cave. She reached the point where the caves connected, but it was only 5 inches wide at that spot. Despite stretching as far as she could, Lynn was unable to reach Donald's head. The cramped, winding passage kept her about 2 feet away from him. Heartbroken, they realized that rescuing Donald from that side was impossible, leaving the rescue team unable to provide him with warm water or nourishment. Time was running out, so they called in a specialized rescue team. This new team began digging with the hope of breaking through to the section of the tunnel where Donald was trapped. They worked tirelessly throughout Sunday, trying to reach the right depth. However, by the end of the day, they were still about 12 feet away from the target tunnel. They continued to dig laterally, attempting to find a way to connect to the passage. By Sunday night, Donald had been trapped for 36 hours in a downward angled position. With each passing hour, Donald's condition deteriorated. He grew colder and more disoriented. The rescuers, undeterred, kept digging in hopes of reaching him from another angle. By Monday morning, nearly 48 hours after he had become trapped, the rescuers heard faint grunts from Donald. It was a sign that he was still alive, although suffering from severe hypothermia. This discovery fueled the team's determination to dig even faster and more efficiently. The situation again shifted to terror when they were hit with a challenging bedrock area that was almost impossible to dig through. With nearly 2 days of entrapment, no food, no water, and the relentless cold, the rescuers began to fear for Donald's survival. The nurse used a Doppler machine and EKG to check for signs of life, but found no pulse in Donald's legs. Despite this, the team continued their efforts, refusing to give up hope. They resorted to using dynamite, a risky but necessary measure. Finally, on Tuesday morning, after nearly 72 hours, a doctor reached Donald and confirmed the worst. He had succumbed to hypothermia and exposure. The heroic efforts of the rescue team had not been enough. The nature of the accident and the cave's unforgiving terrain had sealed Donald's fate. Recovering Donald's body was a grueling task that took another day. The tight passages and jagged rocks made it a challenging operation, but the team persisted. Donald's death left a profound impact on everyone involved. The Crooked Swamp Cave system was locked for limited access, with entry restricted to experienced cavers who were members of recognized organizations. This urge of adventure reminds us about a similar incident that took place in history. Ignoring all caution, one man, driven by a thirst for discovery, ventured into an uncharted passage that turned their fun camping trip into a chilling nightmare. On April 5, 1999, a lively and adventurous 21-year-old named Robert Kennedy from Moggy, Oklahoma, embarked on an overnight camping trip with his stepbrother Richard Steeler Jr. and their friend Ben Kegley from Tulsa. Their destination was the enigmatic limestone enclave of Hermit Cave, a remote site nestled along the eastern shore of Fort Gibson Lake in eastern Oklahoma. Under a vast, starry Oklahoma sky, the trio arrived with the tranquil beauty of the night setting the perfect stage for their adventure. They set up camp and lit a roaring campfire, its flames casting flickering shadows on the surrounding rocks. The night was filled with lively conversations, recounting tales and legends rich with the history and folklore of the region. Hermit Cave, in particular, captivated their imaginations. Though well known among locals, its labyrinthine passages remained largely uncharted, adding to its mystique. Robert, having visited the cave before, was familiar with its main passage, often deemed mundane by many explorers. However, his curiosity was sparked by whispers of hidden side passages said to reveal stunning gypsum formations and other natural wonders. As they sat by the campfire, warmed by its heat against the night's chill, an eerie sense of foreboding crept over them, adding a thrilling edge to their evening. Eventually, lulled by the crackling fire and the enchanting stories, they drifted off to sleep. The following morning, they woke to the serene sounds of nature and enjoyed a leisurely breakfast. The peaceful morning felt worlds away from the previous night's excitement. As they packed up their gear, the allure of Hermit Cave still lingered in Robert's mind. The captivating tales of hidden wonders ignited a spark of adventure in him, leading him to suggest a detour to explore the cave before heading home. Ben was enthusiastic but had an early work shift, leaving Robert and Richard to make a difficult decision. The golden rule of caving dictates that a party should never venture into a cave with fewer than 3 people, ensuring that if one person encounters trouble, another can stay while the third goes for help. Despite understanding the risks, Robert and Richard, driven by a sense of adventure, decided to take the chance. Clad casually in jeans and t-shirts and armed with only a single flashlight, they made their way toward Hermit Cave. The cave's spacious entrance allowed easy access, and they soon found themselves enveloped in its cool, damp air. The light from their solitary flashlight cast long, eerie shadows on the rock walls as they navigated the main passage. They marveled at the natural rock formations despite the slippery and dim conditions, the cave's mysterious ambiance adding to their excitement. As they made their way back toward the entrance, Robert's keen eye caught sight of one of the rumored side passages. Its intricate layout and narrow confines intrigued him, filling him with eager anticipation. Driven by curiosity and a thirst for discovery, Robert felt compelled to explore the side passage. He assured Richard, who agreed to wait outside with the flashlight, that he wouldn't venture too far. The side passage was a challenging 150-foot stretch filled with numerous twists and turns, requiring a special technique to navigate through the cramped limestone tunnels. With determination, Robert squeezed through a keyhole-shaped formation, feeling a rush of accomplishment. Unbeknownst to him, this narrow point would be impossible to pass feet first on his return. As he advanced, the passage became increasingly narrower, prompting him to reconsider. He attempted to crawl backward, but found it impossible. Hoping to find an opening to turn around, he encountered an hourglass-shaped passage with a 30 degrees downward angle. Exhausted and running out of options, Robert squeezed into the opening, exhaling to pass through. He soon found himself hopelessly stuck, his torso wedged tightly between the rock walls. One arm pinned beneath him, the other pushed back by a rock outcropping. Despite his desperate efforts, gravity worked against him, and his struggles only worsened his predicament. Panicking, he called out for Richard's help. The exact time it took for Richard to enter the cave is unclear, but eventually he ventured in, guided by the faint light from the entrance. Hearing Richard's voice gave Robert hope. However, Richard quickly realized he couldn't assist without proper light and told Robert he needed to get help. After what felt like an eternity, a team of 10 rescuers arrived, pooling their expertise to devise a rescue plan. The 150-foot distance between Robert and the main passage posed a significant challenge, allowing only one rescuer to reach him at a time. Breathing difficulties due to the cave's conditions prompted the use of a ventilation system to circulate warmed air. Realizing drilling a shaft was not feasible, they used manual tools to widen the keyhole compression. Despite their efforts, time was running out, and the line between life and death grew increasingly thin. Exhausted but undeterred, the rescuers rotated shifts to conserve energy. Hours ticked by, and one rescuer noticed Robert's condition deteriorating, signs of potential suffocation becoming evident. After widening the keyhole crevice, a rescuer reached Robert's feet. Although Kennedy was unresponsive, a faint pulse in his legs provided hope. However, pulling him out by his feet proved futile due to the lack of leverage. The team decided to dig around Robert's body, painstakingly widening the hourglass compression. The tightness around his torso prevented them from even passing water, making the situation increasingly dire. After a grueling 5-hour operation, Robert was finally freed and brought back to the cave entrance. Paramedics were ready to assess his vital signs and transport him to the hospital, but it was too late. No signs of life were found. A combination of suffocation from chest compression and low oxygen levels led to his rapid loss of consciousness and eventual death. Robert's first and final cave exploration turned into a tragic struggle for survival, a stark reminder of the hidden dangers within uncharted territories. This tragic event etched itself into local history, underscoring the importance of adhering to safety guidelines and respecting the unpredictable nature of cave exploration.